The needle on the gas tank trembled on empty, a perfect mirror for the hollow space in Audrey's heart. Rain lashed against the windshield of her beat-up 1998 sedan, blurring the taillights of the city that had chewed her up and was now spitting her out. Just an hour ago, she had a husband, a tiny apartment she called home, and the fragile hope for the baby growing inside her. Now all she had was the echo of her husband Ethan's final words, "I can't have a child dragging me down. My future is worth more than this, more than you." He had chosen ambition. He had chosen another woman. He had discarded her pregnant and penniless, unaware that the woman he just threw away could buy his entire future with the change in her pocket. This isn't a story about a woman scorned. This is the story of an empire striking back. Life, for Audrey and Ethan Coleman, had been a fragile snow globe, beautiful inside its tiny, self-contained world. Their fifth-floor walk-up apartment in the city's less glamorous district was small. The pipes groaned in winter, and the smell of their neighbors' cooking was a permanent resident. But to Audrey, it was a palace. It was where Ethan, her handsome, ambitious husband, would come home from his junior associate position at Albright & Associates, peel off his one good suit, and become just her Ethan. He'd rub her tired feet after her double shifts at the diner and whisper promises of a future where their biggest worry would be which European city to summer in. Audrey had met Ethan in college, a scholarship student with worn-out textbooks and an intellect that burned brighter than any diamond. She told him, an orphan with no family to speak of, a story that elicited his sympathy and made him feel like her protector. She worked tirelessly, putting her own dreams on hold to support his. Every dollar she earned from tips went into their joint future fund, a jar on their kitchen counter that was mostly filled with her crumpled bills and his loose change. She believed in him with a fierce, unwavering loyalty that was absolute. The first crack in their snow globe appeared 6 months ago when Ethan was assigned to a major project directly under Jessica Albright, the daughter of the firm's founding partner, Robert Albright. Jessica was everything Audrey wasn't, poised, sophisticated, with a lineage that dripped old money and an air of entitlement that followed her like expensive perfume. Ethan began coming home later. The smell of diner grease on his clothes was replaced by the faint alien scent of Jessica's Chanel No. 5. He talked less about their future and more about his career trajectory. "Jessica thinks I have real potential, Aud," he'd say, his eyes gleaming with a new, harder light. "She's introducing me to people, important people." Audrey, ever the supportive wife, would just smile and nod, ignoring the knot of unease tightening in her stomach. She told herself this was it. This was the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. For him. For them. Then, 2 blue lines on a plastic stick changed everything. She had planned a special dinner, a small splurge on a steak and a cheap bottle of sparkling cider. She imagined his face, the surprise, the joy. She imagined them sitting on their lumpy couch, hands on her still flat stomach, planning a new, brighter future with a third member. When he finally walked in, well past midnight, he didn't even notice the carefully set table. He was distracted, agitated, and reeked of whiskey and that damnable perfume. "Ethan, I have something to tell you," she began, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and nerves. "Not now, Audrey," he snapped, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I've had a hell of a night, a hell of a good night," and he flashed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Jessica and her father, they took me to the Century Club. Me. Can you believe it?" The steak sat cold on the plate. The fizz in the cider went flat. "That's wonderful, honey, but this is important." She took a deep breath. "Ethan, I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The air in the tiny apartment seemed to solidify, pressing in on them. Ethan stared at her, his expression shifting from surprise to disbelief, and then to something cold and horrifying calculation. He sank onto the edge of the couch, his head in his hands. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't ask if she was happy. His first words were, "Oh God, no, not now." "What do you mean, not now?" Audrey asked, her heart beginning to pound a painful, panicked rhythm against her ribs. "This is a good thing, a baby, Ethan. Our baby." He looked up and the man she loved was gone. In his place was a stranger, a man with the cold, appraising eyes of a boardroom shark. "A baby." He scoffed, the word tasting like poison in his mouth. "Audrey, do you have any idea what's happening in my life right now? The Albrights are talking about making me a junior partner. A junior partner? Jessica? She sees a future for me. For us. For us." The word caught in her throat. "What about us? This us," she said, gesturing around their small apartment at the life they had built. "This." He laughed a bitter, ugly sound. "This was a stepping stone, Audrey. I thought you understood that. A waitress and a baby. That's not the image of a junior partner at Albright and Associates. That's an anchor, a dead weight." The cruelty of his words struck her like a physical blow. She staggered back, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. "So, what are you saying?" she whispered, though she already knew the answer. "I'm saying you have to get rid of it," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's the only logical solution." Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. "No, I won't. I could never." He stood up, his face a mask of frustration and contempt. "Then you're a fool. Jessica and I are getting serious. Her father approves. This is my shot, Audrey. My one shot at the life I deserve. I will not let you or that," he gestured dismissively at her womb, "ruin it for me." The front door opened without a knock. Jessica Albright stood there, wrapped in a trench coat, looking at Audrey with an expression of pure disdain. "Ethan, darling, is this sorted?" Her voice was smooth like chilled venom. "Jessica," Ethan said, his voice instantly changing, becoming softer. Pleading, Jessica ignored him and took a step into the room, her eyes raking over Audrey's worn-out maternity blouse. "I see. So the little charity case is trying to trap you. How cliché." She pulled a checkbook from her designer handbag. "Let's cut the drama. How much will it take for you to disappear and take care of your problem?" Audrey felt a surge of rage, so potent it momentarily eclipsed her pain. "My baby is not a problem, and my husband is not for sale." Jessica arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Oh, darling, I'm afraid he already is, and I paid the asking price." She looked at Ethan, who couldn't meet her gaze nor Audrey's. He just stared at the floor, the picture of a coward. "Get out," Audrey said, her voice low and dangerous. "Both of you, get out of my home." "Your home?" Ethan finally spoke, his voice dripping with condescension. "The lease is in my name, Audrey. The job that pays for it is mine. You have nothing." He walked to the closet, pulled out her single battered suitcase, and threw it on the floor. "You're the one who needs to get out. I'll have my lawyer send you the divorce papers. Don't try to contact me." "Ethan, please," she begged. The fight draining out of her, replaced by a deep, bone-chilling despair. "Don't do this. I love you. We have a baby on the way." He wouldn't look at her. He just stood by the door, holding it open, as the cold, rainy night air rushed in. "The life I want is out there, Audrey, and it doesn't include you." Jessica smirked, a triumphant, cruel twist of her lips. She walked over to Ethan, looped her arm through his, and gave Audrey one last dismissive look. "Goodbye, Audrey. Do try to have a nice life." The door clicked shut, the sound as final as a gunshot. Audrey stood alone in the middle of the room, the uneaten steak, the flat cider, the shattered snow globe of her life surrounding her. The only thing she had left was the tiny secret life growing inside her, and a name she hadn't uttered in 6 years. A name that could buy and sell Ethan Coleman and the entire Albright dynasty 1,000 times over. Dubois. She was Audrey Dubois, and her period of playing poor was officially and painfully over. The city lights, once symbols of shared dreams, were now just a cruel, blurry watercolor through her tear-filled eyes. Audrey drove aimlessly, the sputtering engine of her car, a sick parody of her own failing heart. Every street corner held a memory, the cafe where they had their first date, the park where he'd proposed with a ring he bought on credit, the cinema where they'd shared popcorn and whispered about the future. It was all a lie, a carefully constructed fiction she had willingly co-authored. The car finally died in a desolate, rain-slicked alleyway, miles from anywhere she recognized. The silence was absolute, broken only by the drumming of rain on the roof and her own ragged sobs. She was homeless, jobless, pregnant, and utterly alone. The check Jessica had sneered about was still on the table, an insult she would have burned rather than cash. For a few terrifying hours, she understood true despair. She felt the cold, hard edge of rock bottom. It was there, huddled in the driver's seat of a dead car, that the grief began to curdle. It twisted and hardened, cooling from a molten sea of pain into something sharp and solid. Steel. The weeping girl who loved Ethan Coleman died in that alley. In her place, a woman she hadn't been in a very long time began to stir. She found a payphone, a relic from another era, much like the part of her she was about to resurrect. Her fingers were numb as she dialed a number etched into her memory, a number she had sworn to herself she would never call again. It rang once, twice, before a crisp, familiar British voice answered a voice that belonged to a world of bespoke suits and mahogany desks. Kensington. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It's me. It's Audrey." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a silence so profound she thought he might have hung up. Then, "Miss Dubois, my God, where are you? Are you all right?" The professional veneer was gone, replaced by genuine, urgent concern. "No, Arthur, I'm not all right," she said, a fresh wave of tears threatening. "I need you. I need to come home." The words felt foreign, like a language she'd forgotten. Home wasn't the cramped apartment. Home was a sprawling, multi-billion-dollar global conglomerate, a dynasty built by her formidable, controlling father, Sébastien Dubois. She had run from that world 6 years ago, desperate for a normal life, for love that wasn't a transaction, for an identity that wasn't just the Dubois heiress. She had found what she thought was love, and it had proven to be the most brutal transaction of all. Within an hour, a sleek black town car, so out of place in the grimy alley, it looked like a spaceship, purred to a stop beside her. A chauffeur in a black suit opened the door, and Audrey, in her cheap, damp clothes, stepped out of one life and into another. The journey back was a blur. She was whisked to a private airfield onto a Gulfstream G650 that was on standby for her family, 24 Arthur Kensington. Her father's most trusted advisor, and the man who had known her since she was a child, was waiting for her on board. He was older, greyer, but his eyes held the same quiet intelligence and kindness she remembered. He didn't pry or ask questions. He simply wrapped her in a cashmere blanket, ordered her a warm meal, and spoke to her in gentle tones. "Your father. He never stopped looking for you, Audrey," he said softly as the jet ascended into the clouds, leaving the city of her heartbreak behind. His methods were unorthodox, but he never gave up hope. Her father, Sébastien Dubois, was a titan of industry, a ruthless negotiator who saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities. He had wanted to merge her life with another powerful family to secure the dynasty. Her refusal, her escape, had been the ultimate act of defiance. When they landed in Geneva, her father was not there to greet her. It was a calculated move, she knew. He was reasserting his power. She was taken to the sprawling Dubois estate on the shores of Lake Geneva, a place she hadn't seen since she was 21. The staff lined the grand hallway, their faces impassive. It was no longer a home. It was a headquarters. She spent the first few weeks in a state of suspended animation, healing physically, but nursing a cold, growing fury within. Arthur became her confidant. She told him everything about Ethan, the diner, the lies, the pregnancy, the final brutal betrayal. She spared no detail. Arthur listened, his expression hardening with every word. When she finished, he looked at her, his gaze steady. "What do you want to do, Audrey?" The old. Audrey would have wanted to hide, to raise her child in quiet obscurity, but she was gone. "I want to learn," she said, her voice clear and strong for the first time in months. "I ran from this world because I didn't understand it. Now I want to command it. I want you to teach me everything my father was going to. Finance acquisitions, corporate law strategy, everything." "And the Colemans, the Albrights?" Arthur asked, already knowing the answer. A wintry smile touched Audrey's lips. "They are a liability, and the first lesson of Dubois Global is that we cut our liabilities. But not quickly. I want them to build their house of cards as high as they can. I want them to feel safe and successful and powerful. And then I'm going to pull the single card at the very bottom and watch it all come crashing down." Her father finally summoned her to his office a month later. The room was intimidating, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake and a desk the size of a small car. Sébastien Dubois sat behind it, a man who radiated power. He was older, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "You were a fool," he said, his voice a low rumble. It wasn't an accusation, it was a statement of fact. "Yes, I was," Audrey agreed, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I was a fool to think I could find value in a world that doesn't understand it. I was a fool to trade a birthright for a fantasy." A flicker of something surprised respect crossed his face. "And now I am your daughter again," she said. "But I will not be a pawn in your games, father. I will be a player. I want my seat at the table. I want control of my own trust fund, and I want access to the best tutors and analysts Dubois Global employs. In return, I will make this company more money than you ever dreamed of." For the next 4 years, Audrey disappeared from the world. She immersed herself in a crucible of education. She worked 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and a burning desire for retribution. She learned to dissect a balance sheet with surgical precision, to spot market trends before they happened, to wage corporate warfare with the ruthlessness of a seasoned general. She was no longer just the heiress, she was becoming the empress. 7 months after her return to Geneva, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Noah. He had her eyes and a quiet strength that she cherished. As she held him in her arms in the sterile, luxurious hospital suite, looking out at the snow-capped Alps, she made him a silent promise. He was not the product of a broken heart. He was not a symbol of betrayal. He was the reason. He was the future. He was the sole shareholder of her heart and the motivation for the war she was about to wage. She let 5 years pass. 5 years for Ethan to climb his greasy pole. 5 years for him and Jessica to become the golden couple of the city's financial scene. 5 years for them to forget the pregnant waitress he'd thrown out into the rain. 5 years was long enough. The statute of limitations on his betrayal was up. It was time to return to the city that had cast her out, not as Audrey Coleman, the broken victim, but as A.M. Dubois, the architect of his ruin. 5 years had been very, very good to Ethan Coleman. He lived in a sprawling penthouse apartment with panoramic city views a world away from the 5th-floor walk-up he now recalled with a shudder. His wardrobe consisted of custom-tailored suits, his wrist sported a Patek Philippe, and his garage housed a gleaming black Maserati. He was no longer a junior associate. He was a senior vice president at Albright & Associates, and his engagement to Jessica Albright made him the heir apparent to her father's throne. He had become everything he had ever wanted to be: successful, respected, powerful, and wealthy. He and Jessica were the darlings of the city's social circuit, their pictures regularly gracing the society pages. They were the perfect couple, a union of old money and new ambition. The memory of Audrey had faded into a dull, inconvenient footnote in his life story. He'd convinced himself he'd done the right thing, the only thing a man with his drive could have done. He'd made a clean break. He'd sent the divorce papers to the last address he had for her, a run-down women's shelter she'd apparently stayed at for a week before disappearing completely. They came back unopened. He'd hired a private investigator for a month more to appease his own conscience than out of any real concern. The PI found nothing. Audrey Coleman, the poor, pregnant waitress, had simply vanished. Ethan told himself she had probably met someone else, another simple man for her simple life. He imagined she had the child and was living somewhere in subsidized housing, a fate he considered both pitiful and deserved. It was a neat, tidy story that allowed him to sleep soundly in his 1,000 thread-count sheets. He had escaped. He had won. His life was a gilded cage, and he was blissfully unaware of the bars. The first hint of a storm came on a Tuesday morning. It arrived not as a thunderclap, but as a whisper in the hallowed halls of Albright and Associates. A major real estate development deal they were financing, the ambitious Phoenix project, had hit a snag. A small, unknown investment firm, Orion Holdings, had quietly bought up the debt of two key subcontractors, effectively giving them leverage over the entire project timeline. Robert Albright, a man whose temper was as legendary as his fortune, was furious. "Who the hell is Orion Holdings?" he boomed in the boardroom, his voice echoing off the polished mahogany. "Find out who's behind it and make this problem go away, Ethan. This project is my legacy." "On it, Robert," Ethan said, with his usual smooth confidence, though a prickle of unease ran down his spine. It was a minor issue, a nuisance, but it was sloppy. He put his best analysts on it. The reports that came back were frustratingly vague. Orion Holdings was a shell company, its ownership hidden behind layers of international corporations. But the money, the real capital, seemed to trace back to a single powerful source, a European private equity firm that had been making aggressive, brilliant moves across the globe. The name was whispered with a mixture of awe and fear in financial circles. Dubois Capital. The name meant nothing to Ethan. It was just another shark in a sea of sharks. He spent a week trying to open a dialogue with Orion Holdings, but his calls went unanswered, his emails ignored. They weren't negotiating. They were just sitting there, a silent, immovable object in the path of his biggest deal. The pressure from Robert Albright mounted daily. His relationship with Jessica, which was built more on mutual ambition than genuine affection, began to show cracks under the strain. "You told my father you had this handled," Jessica said one evening, her voice sharp as she sipped her Chardonnay. "This little hiccup is making you look incompetent." "It's not a hiccup, it's a strategic play by a competitor. I'm handling it," he insisted, loosening his tie. He started having strange dreams of rain and a broken-down car, the faint smell of diner coffee, the accusing eyes of a woman he had tried so hard to forget. He'd wake up in a cold sweat, the luxury of his penthouse feeling like a prison. He dismissed it as stress. A month later, a second blow landed. A reputable financial news outlet published a story detailing potential environmental regulation violations at the Phoenix project construction site. It was a minor infraction, something that would normally be handled with a quiet fine, but the story was written with such precision, backed by leaked internal memos, that it caused a public relations nightmare. Albright and Associates stock dipped by 7%. Investors grew nervous. Ethan felt like he was fighting a ghost. These attacks were too precise, too well-timed. Someone wasn't just competing with them, they were trying to dismantle them piece by piece. The source of the leak was untraceable, but the journalist who broke the story had recently received a very generous grant from a philanthropic foundation. A foundation whose primary benefactor was, according to public records, the Dubois family. Still, the name meant nothing. It was a coincidence. It had to be. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place during a tense meeting with the firm's board. Their primary lender for the Phoenix project, a major international bank, was calling in a portion of their loan due to the project's instability. It was a crippling blow. "Who's behind this?" Robert Albright demanded, his face purple with rage. "Who is pressuring them?" The firm's head of legal, a man named Peterson, cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, it appears that in the last 6 months, Dubois Capital has become a significant, if silent, partner in the bank's global lending division. They've acquired a controlling interest." Ethan felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. Dubois Capital. The name was no longer just a name. It was a spectre, a phantom hand guiding all of his misfortunes. "I want a meeting," Robert roared. "I don't care who this Dubois is. Get him in a room. We'll cut a deal. Everyone has a price." Peterson paled slightly. "That's the other thing, sir. We've been trying. They've been elusive. But their chief representative in North America has finally agreed to a meeting to discuss the complete acquisition of the Phoenix project's distressed assets." "Who is it?" Ethan asked, leaning forward. "Who are we meeting?" Peterson looked down at the file in his hands. "The representative is flying in from Geneva tomorrow. All communications have been through her chief of staff. We don't know much, just her name and title." He paused, flipping a page. "She's the CEO of North American operations for the Dubois portfolio. Her name is A.M. Dubois." The air in the 40th floor boardroom of Albright and Associates was thick with a tension that the state-of-the-art climate control system couldn't disperse. Ethan stood beside Robert Albright, both men staring out at the city skyline, their reflections looking back at them like ghosts. They were dressed in their finest suits, corporate armor, for a battle they didn't fully understand. Jessica stood slightly behind them, her arms crossed, her expression a mask of nervous irritation. For Ethan, the last 24 hours had been a blur of anxiety. The name Dubois had become an obsession. He'd spent the night frantically searching the internet, finding only glossy, sanitized articles about a reclusive, unbelievably wealthy European family and their sprawling, impenetrable empire, Dubois Global. There were pictures of the patriarch Sébastien Dubois, a man who looked like he could command armies with a single glare, but of A.M. Dubois, the CEO of North American operations, there was nothing. No photos, no interviews, no social media presence. She was a ghost, a cipher, with a reputation for ruthless efficiency. "Remember, we go in strong," Robert grumbled, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. "They want the Phoenix project. They can have it, but they're going to pay a premium. This is a negotiation, not a surrender." Ethan nodded, but his confidence felt like a hollow shell. He felt like a man preparing to fight a hurricane with a tennis racket. These weren't just competitors, they were apex predators. The attacks on their firm had been too intimate, too precise. It felt personal. At precisely 10:00 a.m., the boardroom doors swished open. Two figures entered. The first was a man in his late 60s, with silver hair, an impeccably tailored suit, and an air of quiet authority. Ethan recognized him from his research. Arthur Kensington, the legendary right-hand man and chief counsel to Sébastien Dubois himself. The fact that Kensington was here in person sent a jolt of alarm through the room. This was a bigger deal than they had imagined, but it was the person who followed him that made the air freeze. She was tall and graceful, moving with a poise that seemed to silence the very air around her. She wore a bespoke navy blue pantsuit that screamed quiet power and understated wealth. Her dark hair was pulled back into a sleek, elegant chignon, revealing a face that was both familiar and terrifyingly new. Her features were the same, the high cheekbones, the full lips, the shape of her eyes. But the softness was gone. The warmth, the vulnerability, the look of a woman who worked double shifts at a diner. It had all been burned away and replaced by a polished, unyielding strength. Her eyes, the same deep brown eyes that used to look at him with such adoration, were now cool, analytical, and utterly devoid of recognition. They swept across the room, over Robert, over Jessica, and finally over him, with the detached interest of a queen surveying her subjects. Ethan's blood ran cold. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of his own making. The scent of rain from a long-forgotten night seemed to fill his nostrils. It couldn't be. It was impossible. "Robert Albright," Arthur Kensington said, his voice smooth as silk. "May I present Ms. A.M. Dubois, CEO of our North American division." Robert stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Ms. Dubois, a pleasure. I'm Robert Albright, and this is my daughter Jessica, and our senior VP, Ethan Coleman," summed Audrey. It was Audrey did not extend her hand. She gave Robert a brief, almost imperceptible nod. Her gaze lingered on Ethan for a fraction of a second longer, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths before becoming opaque once more. "Mr. Albright," she said. Her voice was the biggest shock of all. It was lower, smoother, with the faint, clipped accent of someone educated in the finest European schools. The gentle, earnest voice that had whispered, "I love you," was gone, replaced by the cool, measured cadence of command. "Let's not waste time with pleasantries. My flight back to Geneva is this evening." The three of them were stunned into silence. Ethan felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. His mind reeled, trying to connect the dots. The poor orphan, the Dubois empire, the targeted, systematic destruction of his career. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a plan, a meticulously crafted, 5-year-long act of vengeance. Audrey and Arthur took their seats on the opposite side of the vast table. She placed a slim, leather-bound portfolio in front of her, but didn't open it. She didn't need to. She already knew everything. "The Phoenix Project is failing." She began, her tone flat and factual. "Your financing is unstable. Your construction is mired in regulatory breaches, and your public image is in tatters. You are hemorrhaging money and credibility." Robert bristled, his face reddening. "Now see here, Ms. Dubois. These are temporary setbacks." "They are not setbacks, Mr. Albright," Audrey interrupted, her voice cutting through his bluster like a shard of ice. "They are symptoms of a terminal illness within your company, an illness of over-leverage and poor leadership." Her eyes flicked to Ethan for a barest moment. "My firm, through its subsidiary Orion Holdings, now controls the critical path of your project. The news story that exposed your environmental violations came from data we acquired. The pressure on your lender came from us. Every one of your setbacks for the past 6 months originated from my desk." The confession was delivered so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that it was more devastating than any shouted accusation. It was a declaration of total war. Jessica was the first to find her voice sharp and incredulous. "You're admitting to corporate sabotage." Audrey turned her head slowly to look at Jessica. "I am admitting to a strategic acquisition of a distressed asset, Miss Albright. Your firm was simply too arrogant to see it. You saw a nuisance. I saw an opportunity." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "We are prepared to offer you 30 cents on the dollar for the entire project. That includes the land, the plans, and all associated debt. It is a generous offer. It will save your firm from bankruptcy and allow you to walk away with a shred of dignity." 30 cents on the dollar was an insult. It was a predator's offer designed to cripple them. "That's outrageous." Robert slammed his hand on the table. Audrey didn't flinch. "The offer is on the table for 1 hour. After that, it drops to 20 cents, and we will begin foreclosure proceedings on the subcontractor's debt, which will freeze your construction indefinitely and trigger a default on your primary loan. The choice is yours." Ethan finally found his voice, a strangled, hoarse sound. Audrey. The name hung in the air like a forbidden word. Audrey turned her full attention to him for the first time. The mask of the CEO slipped for just a second, and in her eyes he saw a flash of the woman he had destroyed. A flicker of immense ancient pain, now forged into something unbreakable. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice dripping with glacial irony. "Have we met?" The denial was more brutal than any admission. She was erasing him, erasing their past, erasing everything. He stared at her, the woman he had cast out into the rain, now sitting opposite him, holding the fate of his entire world in her perfectly manicured hands. He had thrown her away because he thought she was a nobody. He had just discovered she was a queen, and she had returned to burn his kingdom to the ground. The hour that Audrey gave them was the longest hour of Ethan's life. The boardroom, once a symbol of his power and success, became a pressure cooker of panic and recrimination. The moment Audrey and Arthur left the facade of unity, shattered. "What the hell was that? Ethan!" Robert Albright roared, his face a mottled purple. "You know her. She used your first name. It's not. I knew someone named Audrey years ago." Ethan stammered, his mind a chaotic whirlwind. "A long time ago. She was nobody. A waitress. She told me she was an orphan. It can't be the same person." "Doesn't look like a nobody to me," Jessica shrieked, her voice shrill with panic. "She looks like she could buy this entire building with her lunch money, and she has it in for us. For you." "What did you do to her?" Ethan couldn't answer. How could he possibly explain? "I left her when she was pregnant and penniless to be with you, Jessica. I threw her out in the rain because I thought she was worthless. The truth was a toxic bomb that would annihilate what was left of his life." The firm's legal and financial teams scrambled, running models, making frantic calls. The conclusion was unanimous and grim. Audrey's assessment had been brutally accurate. They were trapped. Her moves had been so strategic, so flawlessly executed, that she had them in a corporate checkmate. Refusing her offer meant a swift and public bankruptcy. Accepting it meant financial ruin, a humiliating defeat from which the firm of Albright and Associates would likely never recover. With minutes to spare, a sweating, defeated Robert Albright made the call. They accepted the offer. The Phoenix Project, his legacy, was sold for scraps. But Audrey was just getting started. The acquisition of the project was not the endgame. It was merely the opening salvo. In the weeks that followed, Ethan's world unraveled thread by thread. Audrey, operating as the enigmatic A.M. Dubois, was a relentless, invisible force. First, the social humiliation began. A society gossip columnist, one who had previously fawned over Ethan and Jessica, published a blind item about a prominent financial hotshot who had brutally discarded his pregnant first wife for a life of luxury. The details were just vague enough to avoid a lawsuit, but specific enough that everyone in their circle knew exactly who it was about. Whispers followed Ethan and Jessica at charity galas and country club dinners. Old friends became distant. The invitations started drying up. Next, Audrey came for his professional reputation. She didn't just take over the Phoenix Project. She transformed it. Within 2 months under her leadership, the project was rebranded as the Meridian. The regulatory issues vanished. The financing was restructured with an infusion of Dubois capital, and construction resumed at a blistering pace. She issued a press release, not just announcing the project's revival, but detailing the previous mismanagement and near-catastrophic leadership under Albright and Associates, specifically naming Ethan Coleman as the executive who had run it into the ground. He was a pariah in his own office. Colleagues avoided his gaze. Junior analysts who once idolized him now looked at him with pity or contempt. Robert Albright, his mentor and future father-in-law, now looked at him with undisguised loathing. He saw Ethan not as his successor, but as the man who had brought this curse upon their house. The strain on his relationship with Jessica became unbearable. Their arguments were frequent and vicious. "This is all your fault," she screamed at him one night in their silent, opulent penthouse. "Whatever you did to that woman, you brought her back as a monster. She's destroying my father's company. She's destroying my life." "Our life," he corrected, his voice desperate. "I did it for us." "There is no us anymore," Jessica retorted, her eyes cold. "There is just this mess you've created. You were supposed to be my partner and asset. Now you're just a liability. The biggest one I have." The final blow came directly from Audrey. She poached his entire high-performing analytics team, not with simple offers of more money, but with the promise of working on groundbreaking global projects, of being part of the Dubois empire. She offered them a future, something Ethan could no longer provide. He was left with a skeleton crew, an impossible workload, and the ghost of his former success. He started seeing her everywhere. A glimpse of a woman with dark hair getting into a black car, the flash of a navy blue suit in a crowded lobby. He became paranoid, haunted. The city that had been his kingdom now felt like her personal hunting ground. He tried to reach out. He sent emails to her corporate address, pleading for a meeting. They went unanswered. He tried calling her office, only to be politely but firmly stonewalled by a phalanx of assistants. He, even in a moment of sheer desperation, drove to the address of the new Meridian Project headquarters, hoping to catch her. He was stopped at the gate by security and threatened with a restraining order. She had made herself completely inaccessible. A goddess on a mountain, passing judgment from on high, while he was left to wander in the desolate valley of the consequences she had engineered. He was losing his job, his fiancée, his reputation, his sanity. He had taken everything from her 5 years ago, and she was now repaying him in kind with interest. He realized with a dawning, sickening horror that she wasn't just trying to ruin him. She was systematically erasing him from the world he had paid for with her heart. The summons came on a Friday afternoon. It wasn't a formal invitation, but a stark single-line email from Arthur Kensington's address. "Ms. Dubois will see you. 4:00 p.m. The Meridian Building. 50th floor. Come alone." Ethan felt a surge of both terror and a strange, desperate relief. The silent war was over. This was the final confrontation. He spent the next 2 hours in a daze. He showered and put on his best suit, though it felt like dressing a corpse. He looked at his reflection in the mirror and saw a stranger. The confident, ruthless man who had dismissed Audrey was gone, replaced by a haggard, broken shell. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his hands trembled slightly. The Meridian Building was a gleaming testament to Audrey's power. It was the old Phoenix project, reborn as a skyscraper of shimmering glass and steel that dominated the city skyline. It was the tombstone of his career. He was escorted by a silent security guard to a private elevator. The ride to the 50th floor was quiet, ascending through the clouds. The doors opened directly into a vast, minimalist office. The entire west wall was a single pane of glass, offering a breathtaking, godlike view of the city he once thought he owned. Audrey was not behind the massive empty desk. She was standing by the window, her back to him, looking down at the world below. "It's quite a view, isn't it?" she said, her voice calm and even, without turning around. "From up here, everything looks so small, insignificant." "Audrey." He breathed, his voice barely a whisper. She turned slowly. Today she was dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored cream-colored dress. She looked serene, powerful, and utterly untouchable. There was no anger in her face, only a profound, chilling stillness. "I asked you not to use that name," she said coolly. "Audrey Coleman died 5 years ago in a broken-down car in a nameless alley. You killed her. I am Ms. Dubois." "Please," he said, taking a step forward. "We need to talk. What do you want from me? Money, I don't have much left, but I'll give you whatever you want. Just make it stop." A small, bitter smile touched her lips. "Money? You think this is about money? She gestured around the magnificent office. You have nothing I could possibly want, Mr. Coleman. She walked towards her desk, her movements fluid and deliberate. She didn't sit, but leaned against it, crossing her arms. For 5 years, she began her voice, a low melodic blade. You have lived in a penthouse built on a lie. You wore suits paid for by my broken heart. You toasted your success with a woman for whom you traded your soul. You built a kingdom on my ruins. Did you ever think of me? Of course I. Don't lie. She cut him off, her voice sharp. Not anymore. You didn't think of me. You created a convenient narrative where I faded away, a ghost you could safely ignore. Because to truly remember me, to remember what you did, would mean admitting to yourself the kind of man you really are, a coward, a user, and a thief. He flinched as if struck. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart. I loved you, Ethan, she continued, and for the first time a flicker of the old Audrey, a glint of raw pain surfaced in her eyes. I believed in you. I scrubbed floors and served greasy food so you could chase your dream, which I thought was our dream. I would have done anything for you. And when I came to you with the most precious news a person can share with our child, you looked at me and you saw a liability, a drag on your career. You and that venomous woman, you threw me out like trash. Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. He saw it all again. The rain, her pleading face, the finality of the closing door. I was a fool, he choked out. I was ambitious. I was wrong. I am so sorry. Sorry? Audrey laughed, a sound devoid of all humor. Sorry doesn't bring back the nights I spent in a homeless shelter, terrified, pregnant, and alone. Sorry doesn't erase the fact that you tried to convince me to extinguish the life of my own child for your convenience. She pushed herself off the desk and walked slowly towards him, circling him like a predator. So no, this was never about money. This was about an accounting, a balancing of the books. You took my home, so I took your company. You destroyed my name, so I destroyed your reputation. You took my future, so I took yours. Tit for tat, Mr. Coleman. It's the first rule of business, isn't it? He was openly weeping now, shame and regret washing over him in a sickening wave. What can I do? I'll do anything to make it right. There is nothing you can do, she said, her voice softening but not with pity. It was the softness of finality. Because you still don't understand what you truly lost. She walked back to her desk and picked up her silver picture frame that had been facing away from him. She turned it around. It was a picture of a little boy around 4 years old with dark curly hair and Audrey's deep brown eyes. He was laughing, sitting on a swing in what looked like a beautiful sun-drenched garden. He was a perfect, beautiful child. This is Noah, she said softly. My son. Our son. Ethan stared at the picture, and the full weight of his actions crashed down on him with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just a career, a fiancé, or a reputation he had lost. It was this boy, this laughter, a life, a family. He's beautiful, he stammered, reaching a hand out as if to touch the photo. Audrey pulled it back sharply. Yes, he is. He's smart and he's kind, and he's the center of my entire universe. Every move I have made, every company I have acquired, every strategy I have deployed has been to build a world for him. A world you will never be a part of. She looked at him, the powerful, untouchable Miss Dubois, and for a fleeting moment, he saw her only as a mother protecting her child. You have been fired from Albright & Associates, effective this morning. She stated, her voice once again all business. Jessica Albright has ended your engagement. Your penthouse is a corporate asset, and you will be expected to vacate it by the end of the month. You have nothing left, Ethan. I have made sure of that. She turned and placed the photo of her son back on the desk facing her. The accounting is complete. The books are balanced. Now get out of my office. Get out of my building and get out of my life. He stood there, a completely broken man, stripped of everything. He had discarded her for a kingdom of ambition, and she had returned not just to reclaim her own, but to show him the real priceless treasure he had thrown away. Ethan stumbled out of the Meridian building into the harsh afternoon light, a ghost in a city that no longer knew his name. The world he had so carefully constructed had been publicly and professionally demolished. The news of his firing was already spreading through the financial world. His phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, emails from HR about his severance or lack thereof, a curt text from Jessica that simply said, "Don't contact me again," and alerts from news sites detailing the management shakeup at what remained of Albright and Associates. He spent the next few weeks in a haze of self-pity and despair. He moved into a cheap, short-let apartment that smelled of stale cigarettes, a place that was a grim echo of the one he and Audrey had once shared. The Maserati was repossessed. The Patek Philippe was sold for a fraction of its worth to cover rent. He tried to find work, but Audrey's scorched earth campaign had been thorough. His name was toxic. The man who once commanded boardrooms couldn't get a call back for a junior analyst position. One rainy Tuesday, in a fit of pathetic desperation, he found himself outside a small, exclusive private school on the Upper East Side. He knew from a deep dive into society blogs that this was where Noah was enrolled. He just wanted a glimpse, a chance to see the son he had forfeited. He stood across the street, a pathetic figure in a wrinkled suit, as mothers in luxury eshos and nannies in crisp uniforms collected their children. Then he saw him. Noah came bouncing down the steps, his small backpack askew, his face lit with a joyful smile. He was holding the hand of Arthur Kensington. The boy was chattering away, pointing at a dog on the street, and Arthur was listening with a grandfatherly indulgence. They were a picture of happy normal life, a life Ethan had thrown away. As they approached a waiting town car, the back door opened and Audrey stepped out to greet her son. She knelt, her powerful CEO persona melting away instantly, replaced by the pure, unadulterated love of a mother. She smoothed Noah's hair and hugged him tightly, her face buried in his small shoulder. In that moment, watching them from across the street in the rain, Ethan finally understood. Her revenge was never about destroying him. It was about protecting them. Everything she had done, the corporate takedown, the social exile, was to build a fortress around her new life, with her son, a fortress so high and so strong that the man who had hurt her could never ever touch them again. His destruction was merely a necessary defensive measure. He wasn't the target. He was simply an obstacle that had been removed. Defeated, he turned and walked away, finally accepting his own complete and utter irrelevance. Meanwhile, Audrey's life was just beginning. With the Albright chapter closed, her focus shifted entirely. The cold fire of revenge that had fueled her for 5 years had served its purpose. Now it was replaced by the warm, steady glow of purpose. She had proven to her father and to the world that she was not just an heiress, but a brilliant and capable leader in her own right. She earned not just his respect, but his partnership. She established the Noah Foundation, a massive philanthropic endeavor dedicated to supporting single mothers and providing educational opportunities for underprivileged children. She poured hundreds of millions into it, creating shelters, funding scholarships, and building daycare centers. She used her own painful past as a blueprint to help others build a better future. The girl who once needed a shelter now built them for thousands. She never remarried. Men were interested, of course, powerful, wealthy men who were drawn to her intelligence and strength. But her life was full. Her empire was her work, but Noah was her world. Their evenings weren't spent at galas, but at home in their sprawling Geneva estate, or their New York penthouse doing homework, building elaborate Lego castles, and reading bedtime stories. One evening, about a year after her final meeting with Ethan, Arthur Kensington found her on the terrace of the penthouse, watching the city lights. Noah was asleep inside. "A letter arrived for you today," Arthur said, holding out an envelope. "It's from him." Audrey looked at the plain white envelope. Ethan's name was not on the return address, but she knew. She took it, her fingers steady. For a moment she considered opening it. Perhaps it was a final, desperate plea. Perhaps it was an apology written with the clarity of a broken man. But then she looked at the city lights at the Meridian building shining brightly among them, a monument to her resilience. She thought of her son sleeping peacefully in his bed, safe and loved. She had already written the ending to that story. There was nothing left to say. Without reading it, Audrey tore the letter in half, then in quarters, and let the small white pieces of paper drift from her hand, catching the wind and scattering into the vast, indifferent city below, like ashes of a life she no longer lived. She had her payback, but she had found something far more valuable in the process: peace. She was not the wife who was discarded. She was Audrey Dubois, the woman who built an empire from the ashes, not for revenge, but for the future, and her reign had just begun. Audrey's story is a powerful reminder that our deepest wounds can often become the source of our greatest strength. It's a journey from the ultimate betrayal to absolute triumph, showing that true revenge isn't about destroying someone else's life, but about building your own into something magnificent and unbreakable. She transformed her pain into power, her heartbreak into a global empire, and her role as a victim into that of a victorious protector for her son. If her incredible journey from a rain-soaked alley to the pinnacle of power moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. What did you think of her epic payback plan? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and for more gripping stories of resilience and redemption, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for listening.